Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. How does a legal demand from a crazy neighbor lead to her having to sell her house? She tried to use a local ordinance against me and my new car, so I used that exact same ordinance to make her life a living hell. I bought my dream car about 8 months ago. It was a brand new Tesla Model 3, midnight silver metallic with all the upgrades I'd been saving for since I started my business 3 years ago. I'd finally had a good enough year that I could justify the expense, and I was absolutely thrilled with it. My neighbor Karen, however, was not thrilled. Karen lived 2 houses down from me in our suburban neighborhood. She was in her late 40s, had 3 kids who were constantly running wild through the neighborhood, and had a husband who traveled for work about 80% of the time. She drove a beat-up 2015 Honda Odyssey that was covered in dents and had a check engine light that had been on for at least the 6 months I'd been paying attention. The problems started literally the day I brought the car home. I was outside wiping down the exterior when Karen came walking up my driveway. I figured she was coming to admire the car like a few other neighbors had done. Instead, she stood there with her arms crossed and asked how much I'd paid for it. I told her it wasn't really any of her business, but she kept pressing. Finally, I gave her a ballpark figure just to get her to leave. Her face went red and she asked me if I realized how inconsiderate it was to park such an expensive car in my driveway where people like her had to see it every day and feel bad about their own situations. I honestly thought she was joking at first. I laughed and said something like, "Well, I worked hard for it." She didn't laugh. She told me that some people had real responsibilities, like children, and couldn't afford to waste money on luxury toys. Then she walked away. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen made it her personal mission to make comments about my car whenever she saw me. She'd make loud remarks to her kids about how some people were selfish with their money. She'd talk to other neighbors within earshot about how the neighborhood was changing and how people were getting flashy. One time I caught her taking pictures of my car. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was documenting the deterioration of neighborhood standards for the HOA. We don't have an HOA. Then things escalated. I started noticing that someone had been walking around my property. I have a Ring doorbell and outdoor cameras, and I'd see motion alerts from the middle of the night or early morning. When I checked the footage, it was always Karen. Sometimes she'd just stand at the edge of my driveway staring at the car. Once she tried the door handles. Another time she peered into the windows with her phone flashlight. I confronted her about it. She claimed she was just looking and that if I didn't want people looking at it, I shouldn't park it where everyone could see it. I told her to stay off my property. She told me the sidewalk was public property and she could stand wherever she wanted. Technically true, but she wasn't staying on the sidewalk. She was coming onto my driveway and lawn. I put up a no trespassing sign. She ignored it. Then came the morning that changed everything. I woke up one Tuesday morning to my doorbell ringing repeatedly. Not the normal ring pattern, but someone just leaning on it. I checked my phone and saw it was 6:47 a.m. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas and opened the door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Behind them, I could see Karen standing next to my car, which was no longer in my driveway, but parked on the street in front of her house. One of the officers asked if I was the homeowner. I said yes, still confused and trying to wake up. He explained that they'd received a call about a stolen vehicle. The woman who called it in was claiming that I had stolen her car. One of the officers mentioned, almost apologetically, that the caller had told them she needed the vehicle more than I did because she had 3 children to transport to various activities, and I was just a single person who worked from home and didn't really need a car at all. I stood there for a moment trying to process what I was hearing. Then I looked past the officers at Karen, who was standing there with her arms crossed looking smug, and I realized what had happened. "That's my car," I said. "I can prove it. Give me 2 minutes to get my registration and insurance." The officer nodded. The other officer walked over to talk to Karen while I went inside. I grabbed my registration, insurance card, the purchase paperwork, and my driver's license. My hands were shaking with anger. I also grabbed my phone and pulled up my Ring footage from that morning. When I came back outside, Karen was talking loudly to the officer about how I'd been harassing her, how I'd stolen her identity to register a car in my name, and how she'd been too afraid to confront me directly, so she'd just taken the car back when she saw an opportunity. I handed my documents to the first officer. He looked them over carefully, compared my license to the registration, and then looked at the car's VIN plate through the windshield. Everything matched. "Ma'am," he called over to Karen, "can you provide registration or insurance for this vehicle?" "She has it," Karen said, pointing at me. "She stole my documents when she stole my identity." "Do you have any documentation at all showing this is your vehicle?" the officer asked. Karen went into her house. We stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 10 minutes. When she came back out, she didn't have any keys or papers. She claimed she couldn't find them because I must have broken into her house and stolen them. At this point, the officers were clearly done with her nonsense. Then I showed them my phone. "This is my Ring camera footage from this morning," I said. I played the video showing Karen walking up to my car at 6:23 a.m., opening it with a key fob and driving it away. "How did you get into my car?" I asked her directly. She started to answer, then stopped. One of the officers asked her again. She claimed she'd found a key fob in her yard a few weeks ago and assumed it was hers. That's when I remembered. About 3 weeks earlier, I'd had a small get-together with some friends. We'd been in my backyard, and I'd left my keys on the patio table while we were grilling. The next morning, one of my spare key fobs was missing from my key ring. I'd figured it had fallen off somewhere and hadn't thought much of it since I had another one, but now I realized what had happened. Karen had been snooping around my property that evening. I'd actually seen her walking her dog past my fence several times, and she must have grabbed it when we were all distracted. I explained this to the officers. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I absolutely did. Karen's whole demeanor changed. She started crying and saying she was sorry, that she was stressed about money, that her van was breaking down and she couldn't afford to fix it, and that she'd just borrowed the car to see what it was like. She said she was going to bring it back. "At 6:23 in the morning?" one officer asked. "You were going to bring it back before the owner woke up?" Karen didn't have an answer for that. The officers arrested her for grand theft auto and possession of stolen property. But here's where it gets interesting. A few days later, I received a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to accept a plea deal where Karen would face reduced charges in exchange for agreeing to a restraining order, restitution for my legal fees, and community service. They explained that Karen had no prior record and that taking this to trial would be time-consuming. I agreed, with one condition. I wanted the restraining order to be substantial. Not just a piece of paper, but something with real restrictions. They delivered. As part of the restraining order, Karen wasn't allowed to come within 150 feet of me or my residence. This became a significant problem for her because our driveways were only about 75 feet apart. The judge noted that she'd need to be extremely careful about timing when leaving or entering her property if I was outside, and that she should consider using her back door when possible. Karen tried to argue this was unreasonable. The judge asked if she'd thought about what was reasonable when she stole her neighbor's car and called the police claiming she deserved it more. That shut her up pretty quickly. What made this especially inconvenient for her was that she couldn't be outside in her own front yard if I was in mine. Since I worked from home and often took calls on my front porch for better cell reception, this meant she frequently had to wait inside until I went back in. I wasn't doing it to be petty. I genuinely needed to be outside for work calls with clients, but it definitely made her life more difficult. Then, about 2 weeks after the restraining order was issued, something even better happened. I got a certified letter from Karen's lawyer. Despite everything, the arrest, the charges, the restraining order, she was demanding that I park my car in my garage at all times. The letter claimed that seeing the car caused her severe emotional distress and violated her right to peaceful enjoyment of her property. She cited some obscure local ordinance about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics. I couldn't believe the audacity, but I decided to look up the ordinance anyway. It was real, but it was specifically about abandoned or inoperable vehicles, not regular cars that were being driven daily. However, as I read through it, I noticed something interesting. The ordinance stated that vehicles parked in driveways must be operational and in regular use, and that proof of regular use includes vehicles being moved at least once per day. That's when inspiration struck. I decided to comply, maliciously. I sent a letter back through my lawyer stating that I would be happy to comply with the local ordinance regarding proof of regular vehicle use. I noted that I would be documenting my compliance carefully to ensure I was meeting all requirements. Then I set my alarm every single morning at 6:45 a.m., which was perfectly legal as our noise ordinance didn't start until 10 p.m. and ended at 6:30 a.m. I would go outside, start my car, and let it warm up for a few minutes. Then I'd back it out of my driveway, drive it around the block, and park it again. The route I took went directly past Karen's bedroom window, every single day. On weekends, I did it twice, morning and evening. I was complying exactly with the ordinance she'd cited, proving my car was operational and in regular use by moving it daily. I even kept a detailed log documenting each time I moved it, with timestamps and odometer readings, just in case she tried to claim I wasn't following the rules she'd demanded I follow. The Tesla is nearly silent when driving at slow speeds in residential areas, but it's not completely silent. And the sound of a garage door opening, a car starting, backing out, driving past, returning, and the garage closing again is definitely noticeable, especially at 6:45 in the morning. Karen called the police about the noise 3 times in the first week. Each time the officers confirmed I wasn't violating any noise ordinances. They were the same officers who had responded to her theft report, and I could tell they were getting annoyed with her. She tried to claim I was harassing her by repeatedly driving past her house. The police pointed out that I was using a public street and had every legal right to drive on it. I also showed them my compliance log and explained that I was simply following the ordinance she had cited in her legal demand. She tried to say I was stalking her. The police reminded her that she was the one with a restraining order against her, not me, and that I was simply driving in my own neighborhood. One officer actually laughed and said something like, "Ma'am, you can't steal someone's car, demand they park it in their garage, and then claim they're harassing you when they drive it on public streets." The best part? Because I was now moving my car every single day, it was clearly in regular use per the ordinance she'd cited, which meant there was absolutely no basis for her to claim it should be garaged to avoid being an eyesore. Her own demand had backfired completely. After about 3 weeks of this, I received another letter, this time from a different lawyer. Karen was withdrawing her request about parking and asking me to please cease the unnecessary vehicular movement that was disturbing the peace. My lawyer responded that I was simply complying with her previous demand to prove regular use of my vehicle per the ordinance she had cited, and that I'd be happy to stop once I received written confirmation she was withdrawing all complaints about my car and acknowledging that I had the right to park it wherever I wanted on my own property. She sent the confirmation within 48 hours. I kept up the routine for another month anyway, just to make my point clear. Then I went back to my normal schedule of driving when I actually needed to go somewhere. But Karen wasn't done making her situation worse. She tried to sue me in small claims court, claiming I had damaged her lawn during the incident. I hadn't. The car never left the street, and demanding $2,500 in compensation. The judge took one look at the case file, saw the theft charge and restraining order, and dismissed it immediately. He also warned Karen that filing frivolous lawsuits could result in sanctions. She tried to get the restraining order modified, arguing that it was interfering with her daily life. The judge refused and noted that the consequences of her actions were her own responsibility to manage. She sent letters to other neighbors claiming I was a dangerous person who had falsely accused her of theft. A few neighbors actually came to ask me about it, and I just showed them the police report and court documents. After that, most people on the street stopped talking to Karen entirely. The turning point came about 4 months after the restraining order was issued. Karen's husband, who had been traveling for work through most of this drama, came home. I don't know exactly what happened, but based on what I heard from other neighbors, he was absolutely furious when he found out what she'd done. There were several loud arguments that echoed through the neighborhood. Apparently, the legal fees and restitution costs were around $8,000, which they couldn't really afford, especially on top of the repairs their van needed. About 2 weeks after he got home, Karen put a for sale sign in their yard. She moved out about 2 months after that. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they'd separated. She moved to an apartment complex about 20 minutes away, and he kept the house with the kids. Someone told me he was embarrassed by the whole situation and didn't want anything to do with her anymore. The restraining order technically still has about 2.5 years left on it, but since she doesn't live nearby anymore, it's kind of a moot point. The new neighbors who bought Karen's house are great. They're a young couple with a 1-year-old and they think my car is cool. The husband is actually thinking about getting an electric vehicle himself and has asked me a bunch of questions about charging and maintenance. I still park my car in my driveway, exactly where I want it. Every time I see it, I think about Karen's face when the police took her away in handcuffs, and when she had to withdraw her ridiculous parking demand, and when she realized she'd literally forced herself to move because she couldn't live with the consequences of her own actions. The best revenge wasn't even the legal consequences, it was watching her try to demand I do something, complying exactly as she asked in a way she didn't expect, and watching it blow up in her face so spectacularly that she had to leave the neighborhood. Sometimes I still do my morning drive around the block just because I like the routine now. The new neighbors wave when they see me. It's peaceful, and my car is still absolutely beautiful. The next one is a malicious compliance story. About 2 months ago, I worked for an absolute tyrant of an administrator. The dude was terrible. Terrible enough to warrant me writing from the apparent point of view of a 48-year-old teacher who wishes he was Sigma. But I digress. Before working at this school, I had spent the previous 18 years or so teaching 8th grade math, 4th grade math, or working as an academic coach. I switched schools primarily because of location. I found a school on the other side of the mountain I stare at every night and figured it would be a good match. Nope. This administrator, whom we will call Poppin' Fresh, shut me down every step of the way. I started at the school in the middle of the school year. The students were rough, and evidently they had already run 2 other teachers out before me. On my first day of training, the school and district academic coach trained us on a math, English language arts, and basically anything you want gaming program called GimKit. I understand that GimKit is not education by itself. It is simply a 5-minute tool to find out whether students understand the content, and it engages them extremely well. On my first day with students, I saw how terrible their behavior was. Because of that, I decided it was going to take a little bit of grace to get them to listen to me, so I showed them GimKit. They had their Chromebooks open for no more than 30 seconds when TA, also known as Terrible Administrator or Poppin' Fresh, came into the room and shut it down instantly. He never assessed the situation. He would simply pop into the classroom, bouncing around like he was on something, see kids doing an activity that looked hokey to him, and immediately shut it down. This happened constantly. I would instruct for no more than 8 minutes at a time, then walk around and help students with the concepts as best I could. I would be walking around the room, and he would pop in and tell me to change something, like clockwork. Every program, strategy, or center-based activity I tried to use to motivate the 7th graders was shut down instantly. Finally, he said out loud, "Teach only what is on the tests, nothing more. Bet." I took that as an opportunity to enter some malicious compliance with a site of, "I cannot believe I am here." I started going by the book 100%. Anytime a student asked, "Why do we do it like this?" While we were working on surface area and volume, I only said, "That is not on the test." Anytime I naturally felt the urge to connect the lesson to other standards, I stopped myself. It was not on the test. Over a short period of time, the students became frustrated and started sitting there yawning. It honestly pained me, so I decided to apply my malicious compliance only when good old Poppin' Fresh popped back into my classroom. Eventually, he came in with his boss, his boss's boss, and a couple of people I had never seen before. I instantly switched from my normal, go deeper, think outside the box, activity-based learning approach to exactly what he wanted, teaching only what was on the test. I instantly turned into Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The students immediately groaned, "Mr. OP, I hate when you teach us like this." Then the comments started flying around the room. "This is the worst part of my day. I hate math now, thanks." There were also many more colorful, expletive-filled comments. Frank Caliendo even seemed to pop in for a moment. "Now here's a guy who does not know how to motivate students. Boom." Poppin' Fresh doubled down on his usual banter, clearly putting on a show for his crew of bosses. "These kids seem highly unmotivated, OP. We need to meet about this if you cannot get them engaged," I interjected. "You told me to only teach what is on the test, so that is what I'm doing. Only what is on the test, right? If they want to know why something happens or how to solve it a different way, that is not on the test, right? You told me to just be up and be teaching and never have them on their Chromebooks, right?" I said this to him while his accompanying party was definitely within earshot. I did that because I had a feeling these were the head honchos, the people who had signed off on spending all that money to make our school a true one-to-one school where every student had a Chromebook. Not using the Chromebooks was something I knew Poppin' Fresh believed in, but I had a feeling the district would want students properly utilizing them. He replied, "I only stopped you from using the Chromebooks because the kids were all just playing games." The students immediately interjected, "It is a math game." Then the head honcho moved to Interjection City. "Well, let's see what this math game is all about." So I had the students get their Chromebooks. They all excitedly logged on. I pulled up a surface area and volume GIM kit, and the students started feverishly playing while using pencils and notebooks to solve the problems they needed to answer in order to gain ammunition in the game. It was active, it was fun for everyone. I paused the game when needed to show different ways to isolate the variable when solving surface area problems, especially involving spheres, cones, and similar shapes. It was what education was supposed to be. Pop and Fresh ran out of pop. By the end of the day, I received an email from the head honcho himself asking me about him and how things were going. I was honest. I told him about the assaults, threats of assault, and hidden assaults. Those things would probably make this story even more interesting, but they are not directly related to the malicious compliance here. They are also part of an ongoing investigation even 2 months later, while I am now teaching at a new school on the other side of the proverbial mountain. Pop and Fresh is under investigation for what he has been doing to me and other new teachers at the school. And from what I understand, that investigation is crawling all the way up the chain. The next one is an entitled People Story. I am 21 and my best friend is also 21. We have been friends for 8 years. We initially bonded because we both had similar chaotic home situations with our parents, so our relationship has always felt almost like we were siblings. However, recently I have started noticing patterns that I am no longer willing to put up with. For starters, we have never been on the same page about finances. I have always been on my own. I paid for my own college, clothes, bills, car, and basically everything else. I have been working since I was 14. She, on the other hand, has always had some support from her aunt. It is not anything substantial or life-changing, but her aunt helps her with occasional money. Her parents are not responsible or present for her, and I empathize with that because mine are the same way. She has a summer job as a camp counselor for children. It is not full-time, and she wants to become a teacher. She has also been putting off getting her driver's license for years. She does not have a car, so anytime we want to hang out or go somewhere, I am always the one driving. I am often going out of my way to include her, and until recently I was happy to do that. I started noticing years ago that whenever I complained about my job, she never seemed to understand what was fair or unfair in a workplace. She also did not understand the exhaustion that comes from working a full week. Eventually, I stopped going to her when I needed to rant about work. That same disconnect has carried into our friendship now. It feels like she does not understand the value of hard-earned money. For example, I feel like I am always expected to put my card down, buy things when we go to the beach, pay for most of the groceries when we take little trips, and drive everyone around. Recently, we went out to eat, and I put my card down. A few days later, I noticed she had not paid me back. When I asked her to, she said eventually, and sent me a picture of her empty bank account. I texted her and asked if in the future she could please let me know ahead of time if she needed to pay me back later. We are both broke college students, and the next day, I ended up blowing out a tire and immediately started looking at the people who owed me money. She never acknowledged my text. Granted, none of us should have been going out to eat in the first place. I learned that lesson the hard way, but it bothered me that she did not acknowledge it, or at least say sorry or thank you for covering the bill. I had also been helping her practice for her driving test. She finally scheduled a test date after I had been bothering her for months to do it. Unfortunately, the test happened to fall on the second day of my first full-time post-graduation job. I allowed her to use my car for the test because she did not have anyone else. We were practicing, and she was going away the weekend before the test. We were both free on Monday, which was the day before my first day at my new job, and she asked to practice that day. I told her I wanted the day to myself because I was about to start working full-time for the rest of my life. She responded, "So what, I'm just not going to practice?" I told her it was not my problem that she felt unprepared. We practiced that day anyway because I am a pushover. But it bothered me that she ignored my boundary, and it confirmed for me that she does not really understand what it means to have a real job. Another example happened when we went on a trip to her aunt's house for the 4th of July this year. We went to the grocery store, and when it was time to pay, I asked how we were going to split everything. She grabbed the items she personally wanted, and I paid for the rest. I paid $70, she paid $20. I was furious. The next morning, we went out early to get donuts. I paid for the entire group's donuts, which came to $50 because there were 8 of us. She did not even offer to chip in. Long story short, moments like these have become more common. Recently, she was sick, so I made her homemade soup with chicken broth I had made myself because I enjoy cooking. I delivered it to her house. She said thank you. The next day, she texted me that she wished it had more broth. Like what? I have always been transparent with her when I am struggling with money, and I know she does not have much money either, but I am becoming less willing to go out of my way when I am rarely acknowledged or thanked. I also feel like she is an adult and can start taking charge of these things in her own life instead of relying so heavily on me. She has had a harder life than most people, and I will give her that. But so have I. There are times when she gives me gas money or pays for the whole group's dinner, but those moments are very, very few and far between. Overall, the friendship still feels extremely unbalanced. How do I set boundaries without ending the friendship? Is she being entitled? Is this intentional? There are good moments in our friendship, even though all of this sounds terrible. She has been there for me in other ways and understood me when no one else has. What do I do? The next one is an entitled parent story. Here's the cleaned up version with smoother paragraph flow and all details preserved. In India, you generally see strict parents, but mine are different. Mine are genuinely unstable. My dad seems to love his own madness. He used to beat us, he has burned our house, stabbed someone's hand with a knife, and bitten us in anger. I honestly do not think he is a normal man. We never really talked to him. Whenever he came home, we would just sit there quietly. No television, no phone. Nothing. We were always afraid that if he disliked even one small move, he would beat us. It has been 2 years since he started living away from us. Honestly, it has been a relief. Now comes my mother. I am 19 now, and I am mature enough to understand the difference between normal parenting and discrimination. I know what it means when someone shows you over and over that you are nothing to them. When I tell people my mother does not love me and only loves her son, they think I mean she gives him more food or something small like that. No, I could tolerate something like that easily. There are things I cannot fully expose here, but when I was 17, I told my mother about something that happened when I was 12 or 13. I had hidden it for years because deep down I already knew she would not support me. When I finally told her, she said I was lying and beat me for saying it because it involved her son. Maybe someone reading this will think I am also unstable for judging my mother, but this is not the only example. My mother has a friend who lives 3 or 4 streets away. She used to visit our house. One day I met her daughter and we became friends. Later, my brother booked tickets to a water park for my mother, me, and that girl. During the drive, we saw a girl riding a cool bike, and I was fascinated. I do not really talk to my family, so my brother started making insulting jokes about girls. It triggered the girl a little, and she replied in a light, joking way that girls can do things too, and that riding a bike is just one example. You will not believe what my mother did. She reported it to that girl's mother and said, "Your daughter is out of your hands." Why? Because the girl talked back to my brother. It has been months, and that girl has not come by again. I experience this kind of thing every day. Now comes my brother. I do not trust him. I know people say brother and sister, but I do not feel safe around him. I try to stay safe from him because of the way he looks at me and behaves. Girls will understand what I mean. My brother has been in relationships and all that. Recently, he claimed there was a spirit inside him. My mother cried all day for him. And honestly, I did not care what was happening to them. If my brother is someone his own sister cannot trust, and my mother is someone who calls me a liar when I tell her something serious, then if I am bad for not caring, I am okay being bad. When I heard my mother crying over his spirit issue and acting depressed, I knew it was fake. I even said it was fake. My mother went to temples, priests, and all kinds of places. After 2 months, we found out it was because of a girl. There is also a cousin of ours. She was sent from the village to stay with nearby relatives because her mother is a widow. We have enough money, and that relative does too, so we helped get her into classes and everything. Then my brother started seeing her at night. I do not even know why. They were once caught by the police at 3 a.m., roaming on the road after lying to both families. People also reported that they were using bad words with each other and talking constantly. When I say constantly, I mean my brother would be in the bathroom on a video call with her. The relative who was taking care of the cousin is very old-fashioned. She said in front of everyone that there was something going on between them and sent the girl back. Now, my mother hates that relative who is actually my mother's sister. Why? Because she said something bad about my mother's son. A few days ago, we went to that cousin's house in the village because my brother forced us to go. There, they were caught again. Everyone had been calling them for 30 minutes, but they were alone in a room talking and talking. Since people already suspected them, everyone suspected them again. We were all sitting there and they started arguing, saying they were not doing anything and so on. Then my brother suddenly turned everything toward me. I was silently lying on the bed, not saying anything. He pointed at me and said that I was also bad. Me? He pointed at me because my mother had called that cousin a bad girl. That was it. She called her a bad girl. Then he gave a whole speech about me using very beautiful words in front of everyone. And my mother? She just listened. We have the same mother and the same father, but completely different mindsets. He was even ready to go after my mother, too. It felt like he was going to slap her, or do something because he said, "I am going to grab your throat." Still, she loves him. Today they both fought. I do not know why, I just heard my brother beating my dog. My dog is my love, so I went to ask my mother what happened, and she started ranting her anger at me. I silently came back to my room and ignored her. May they rot in hell. May they suffer the way they have made me suffer. I do not want a family like this. One day, I will earn money and run away. And let me tell you about me. My plan is to never marry because I do not think I can ever trust men. My father had an affair, and my brother is not even someone I feel physically safe around as a girl. I have had 0 boyfriends. I have never smoked or done anything like that. I love studying. I am a bookworm. Still, I am the hated one. I cook everything. I wash clothes for the whole house. I get good grades. I never speak up in front of them. And somehow, I am still the one they hate. Anyway, thank you for watching.